Good evening, travelers, and welcome back to Untold Nightmares. Tonight, we aren't stopping in quiet neighborhoods or small towns. We're staying on the road. Highways that should have been lifelines have turned into corridors of terror, from endless stretches of desert blacktop to back roads where time itself refuses to move. Every mile carries a story that will make you think twice before driving alone at night. These aren't just campfire tales. They're drawn from truckers, travelers, and police reports. Accounts of people who vanished, convoys that should not exist, and roads that seem hungry for the living. The kind of encounters that start as routine trips and end in ways too disturbing to forget. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Untold Nightmares for true horror stories that will follow you long after the engine goes quiet. Now, let's take that first mile together. But be warned, once you start down these roads, not everyone makes it back. I've spent most of my life on the road. Some men work in offices, some in factories, but my life has been measured in miles and white lines blurring beneath me. I've driven through cities where the lights never go out, and I've crossed stretches of land so barren it felt like God himself forgot to paint them in. The road can be comforting when you know it, but it can also turn on you, whispering things you don't want to hear when you're too tired, too alone, and too far from anywhere safe. This happened last November. I was hauling freight west, running Route 66 between Albuquerque and Gallup. It's one of those stretches you learn to both love and hate. Love, because the desert at night can be beautiful in its own way. Hate, because it's empty enough to make you wonder if you've slipped into another world without noticing. That night, it was nothing but black sky, cold stars, and a highway so straight it could cut the country in half. I'd been driving since early afternoon, and by the time the clock on my dash blinked past 1 a.m., I was in that dangerous space between exhaustion and autopilot. The kind of tired where you startle awake only to realize you hadn't been fully asleep but damn close to it. My cab smelled like stale coffee and sunflower seed shells, with the faint metallic tang of diesel that seeps into everything after enough hours. The heater hummed low, just enough to keep the chill off, but I kept the driver's window cracked to let the desert air slap me awake every few minutes. The radio had fizzled out hours earlier. Out there, you either get nothing but static or a preacher ranting from some AM frequency strong enough to cross state lines. I twisted the dial now and then, desperate for any sound, but all I found was hiss. It left me with nothing but the growl of the engine and the steady drone of tires rolling over asphalt. Some truckers like the silence. I've always hated it. Silence leaves too much room for the mind to wander. I told myself I'd stop at the next exit, grab a cup of coffee, maybe stretch my legs, but the exits never came. The road stretched on endlessly, and the landscape flattened into a desert void. No glowing diner signs, no gas stations with buzzing neon, not even the glimmer of headlights from another traveler. Just me, my rig, and the stars. That's when I saw her. At first I thought it was a trick of my headlights. The desert plays games with shadows, turning rocks into people and fence posts into shapes that look alive until you pass them. But this wasn't a shadow. It was too still, too solid, standing right at the edge of the blacktop. As the distance closed, the details came clear. A young woman. She was standing on the gravel shoulder, posture stiff, arms hanging limp at her sides. She wore a pale dress, fluttering faintly in the night breeze, though the air was cold enough to bite bone. At her feet sat a small duffel bag, neatly placed, like she'd been waiting for a ride all night. Her hair was long and dark, falling across her shoulders, in strands that didn't move with the wind the way they should have. And the strangest part was how she didn't move at all, not a step forward, not a wave of the hand. She just stood there, eyes locked on the road, as though she knew I would stop for her. My foot eased off the gas before I had time to think. I wasn't the type to pick up hitchhikers, not anymore. Not in this day and age, but something about leaving her out there on that godforsaken stretch of road felt wrong. My rig slowed as the headlights swept over her face, and for the briefest second, I almost slammed the gas again. Her face looked blank. I don't mean calm, I mean blank. Smooth, like a mannequin. No expression, no recognition. Then she blinked, and in that instant, it was as if the details rearranged themselves into something human again. I rolled down the window. Need a ride? She gave a slow nod. Deliberate. I leaned over, unlocked the passenger door, and she climbed in without hesitation. No smile. No thank you. Just slid into the seat, set her duffel neatly on the floor, and folded her hands in her lap like a schoolgirl, waiting for a teacher to call her name. That's when the smell hit me. It wasn't perfume, sweat, or anything familiar. It was earthy, damp, like soil after rain. It clung to the air, sharp and wrong for the desert, where everything smelled like dust and dryness. I shifted in my seat, cleared my throat. The scent didn't fade. I pulled back onto the highway. "Where you headed?" I asked. She turned her head just enough for the dashboard light to catch her eyes. They weren't blue. They weren't hazel. They weren't any color I'd ever seen. They were gray, flat storm cloud gray like the sky before a tornado. "West," she said softly. Her voice was low and smooth, but with a rasp, like she hadn't used it in days. No town, no city, just west. I waited for her to elaborate, but she didn't. She turned back toward the windshield, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of blacktop. The silence thickened. I fiddled with the radio again, flipping through dead air, but found nothing. I cleared my throat, hummed under my breath. None of it mattered. Every sound died in the space between us, swallowed whole. A few miles later, the temperature dropped. At first, it was just a chill creeping in, enough to make me adjust the heater. Then my breath began to fog faintly in front of me, and a haze crept along the edges of the windshield. I frowned, swiped it clear with my sleeve. Within seconds it returned, thicker, crawling inward until the glass was nearly opaque. My chest tightened. I turned to glance at her. She hadn't moved. Her hands still pressed together, posture stiff, but her head had tilted like she was listening to something outside the cab. "You all right over there?" I asked, my voice louder than I meant. She turned to me, slow, deliberate, and then she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. Too wide, too perfect, like someone had practiced the shape in a mirror but never learned how to make it real. "Do you live alone, Tyler?" she asked. The name hit me like a brick. My hands jerked, the rig swerving before I corrected. My pulse slammed against my ribs. I hadn't told her my name, not once. My throat went dry. "How do you know my name?" She didn't answer. She turned back to the windshield, the smile gone. I told myself I'd drop her at the next exit. Motel, gas station, didn't matter. She wasn't staying in my cab another mile. But the exits never came. The highway stretched on like an infinite loop. I'd driven this road before. I knew there should have been towns by then. Instead, the blacktop bled into the horizon, endless. That's when I noticed her posture had changed. Her hands weren't folded anymore. They were flat against her thighs, fingers rigid, nails digging into the fabric of her dress. Her breathing had gone shallow, chest rising so faintly it was almost invisible. Then she whispered, "Don't stop. They'll catch up." Every hair on my body stood on end. My voice shook. "Who?" Her head snapped toward me. Her eyes weren't gray anymore. They were black, bottomless. "The ones behind us." My stomach dropped. I flicked my eyes to the mirrors. At first there was nothing, just endless road. Then, faint in the distance, headlights. One car. Then another. Then three more. clumped together, growing brighter by the second. And unlike normal headlights, they didn't bounce. They didn't waver. They burned steady, glowing orbs cutting across the blacktop, closing fast. My palms slicked against the wheel. My chest clenched tight. The rig groaned as I pressed harder on the gas. The lights drew closer anyway. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "They have been waiting for you." The headlights behind me swelled brighter, multiplying, fusing together until it felt like a wall of light bearing down on the back of my rig. I pressed harder on the gas, the engine groaning, gears straining as the speedometer crept past a number I usually wouldn't risk with a full load. Still, they closed in. The woman hadn't moved. Her posture was as rigid as ever, head tilted slightly toward the window, eyes black as tar. Her voice was low but sharp, slicing through the noise of the engine. "Don't let them catch you." My chest pounded. The steering wheel slickened beneath my palms. I flicked my eyes to the mirrors again, desperate for detail. The lights weren't normal. They didn't sway, didn't shake with the road. They glided, perfectly even, perfectly steady, burning like orbs suspended just above the pavement. The road ahead stretched empty. No exits, no towns, no neon diners. Just blacktop swallowing the horizon. The desert on either side was flat, endless, offering nowhere to hide. I muttered to myself under my breath, anything to ground myself. It's just cars, just late-night drivers, that's all. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I couldn't hear engines, couldn't hear tires on asphalt, just the roar of my own truck, laboring under the push of my foot on the accelerator. The orbs of light grew closer, too close. They should have blinded me in the mirrors, but instead they burned steady, casting no flares, no shadows, just an unnatural glow. Then, without warning, they surged forward. One blink, they were 100 yards back. The next, they were almost on my bumper. My stomach lurched. I slammed the wheel left, swerving into the opposite lane, expecting them to shoot past. They didn't. They followed. Perfectly. The woman's lips parted. For the first time since she got in, her expression shifted. She looked almost amused. They liked the chase. I snapped my eyes to her. "Who are they? What do they want?" She smiled again, too wide, too smooth. "They want you." The lights behind me flared, so bright the cab lit up as if it were daytime. I clenched the wheel tighter, blinked against the glare. When my eyes adjusted, my stomach dropped. Shapes. Between the orbs of light, I saw shapes moving. Figures walking in the glow. Not drivers, not passengers. Human-shaped shadows striding along the road, keeping pace with cars that weren't there. Their heads turned toward me, their movements jerky and wrong, like marionettes tugged on invisible strings. I swore under my breath and pushed the accelerator flat. The rig shuddered, every bolt rattling as I begged it for more speed. The lights didn't fall back. They matched me, closing in, filling the mirrors with blinding glow and writhing shadows. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. Darkness. The road behind me was empty again. I gasped for breath, realizing I'd been holding it. My arms ached from gripping the wheel. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. When I turned to the passenger seat, she was gone. No sound, no movement, no trace. Just an empty seat. The duffel bag was gone too, but the smell lingered. Damp earth, heavy and suffocating, filling the cab like water, filling a sinking ship. I drove on, eyes darting between the road and the mirrors, waiting for the lights to return. They never did. Instead, after what felt like hours, a faint glow appeared on the horizon. Civilization. A diner. Its neon sign buzzed weakly against the dark sky, spelling out the word "Eats" in half-dead tubing. A single pickup truck sat in the gravel lot, dust coating its hood. The place looked like it hadn't changed since the 50s, but at that moment it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I pulled in, killed the engine, and climbed down from the cab. The cold night air bit at my skin. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the neon sign. Inside, the diner was warm and dim. A waitress with tired eyes stood behind the counter. 2 old men hunched in a booth by the window, their voices low, coffee mugs steaming between them. "Coffee?" the waitress asked, forcing a polite smile. "Yeah," I croaked. My throat was raw. I slid into a booth, pressed my palms against the sticky table, and tried to stop my hands from shaking. When she brought the mug, I blurted the question before I could stop myself. "You ever see a hitchhiker out here? Young woman, pale dress." The waitress froze, just for a second. Then she set the mug down slowly, her eyes flicking to mine. "You mean the girl in white?" My blood ran cold. "She's been around a long time," the waitress said softly. "Died in a wreck out here, years back. Folks pick her up sometimes. She never makes it through the night. Always disappears before morning." The old men had gone silent. One of them stared into his coffee like it was all the proof he needed. I left a crumpled bill under the mug and stumbled back outside. The gravel crunched beneath my boots. The desert air cut sharp. My rig loomed in the lot, silent, waiting. When I opened the door, the smell hit me, stronger than ever. Damp earth, suffocating thick, and sitting neatly on the passenger seat was the duffel bag. I froze. My heart rattled in my chest. The bag hadn't been there when she vanished. I'd checked. The seat had been empty, but now it sat upright, perfectly placed, waiting. With shaking hands, I reached for it. The zipper was cold, metal biting at my fingers. I pulled it open slowly, breath shallow. Inside, there was only one thing. A folded piece of paper. I opened it. Written in neat dark ink was my full name, my address, my wife's name, my daughter's name, and, underlined at the bottom, "See you at home." The paper slipped from my hands. My knees buckled, breath tearing from my lungs. I scrambled out of the cab, sucking in dry desert air, desperate to wash the smell from my throat. When I turned back, the passenger seat was empty again. The duffel bag was gone. But then, from the back of the cab, I heard it. A voice, small, sweet. My daughter's voice. "Daddy?" The sound came from inches behind my seat. The smell of damp earth filled my lungs, and in the rear-view mirror, for the briefest flash, I saw them. Gray eyes staring back. I never should have been behind the wheel that night. I knew it the second I pulled out of the hospital lot, but I couldn't stop myself. My mother had been discharged earlier that afternoon, and the image of her frail frame against those white sheets wouldn't leave my mind. She'd forced a smile when I told her I'd drive home in the morning, but I saw the relief in her eyes when I mentioned leaving sooner. I think she didn't want me seeing her like that, weak and worn. I told myself the drive would clear my head. 5 hours wasn't bad. I'd done longer. Besides, I couldn't stand the smell of antiseptic clinging to me, or the way the hospital halls echoed with quiet coughing and beeping machines. The thought of a cheap motel bed made my skin crawl. I needed to move, to feel the road pulling me away from all that. The clock on my dash said 11:08 when I merged onto Route 287. Amarillo shrank behind me, its faint orange glow swallowed by flat horizon. The highway unspooled into black nothingness, my headlights cutting a pair of white tunnels into the dark. The heater wheezed out weak warmth that smelled faintly of burnt dust. I cracked the window just enough to let in a thin blade of cold air. It slapped my cheek, made my eyes water, and for a moment, it felt good. Proof that I was still awake. But fatigue is a liar. It doesn't always announce itself with heavy eyelids. Sometimes it whispers through the hum of tires, making the steady drone feel like a lullaby. Sometimes it hides in the silence between radio stations, in the weight of your own breathing. By midnight, I could feel it stalking me. I chewed sunflower seeds to keep my jaw working, spitting husks into an old water bottle. My jaw ached, my tongue felt raw, but it was better than silence. Out here, silence feels alive. The land around me stretched flat and empty. Fences ran crooked lines into infinity. Grain silos rose like black monoliths against the starfield. I passed a cluster of houses with their windows dark, a diner with a neon sign still buzzing, open even though the lot was empty, a graveyard with a sagging fence, and headstones leaning toward the road like watchers. For a while, that was all there was. Just me, the road, and the hum. I started talking to myself. Little things, just to hear a voice. Stay awake, just another 4 hours. You've got this. My own words sounded foreign in the stale air of the car. The radio was no help. Static on every station, though once or twice I swore I heard faint notes of music woven into the hiss. Not a song, not exactly. Just tones, slow, droning, almost like a hymn. Each time I twisted the dial, the tones cut out, leaving nothing but white noise. That's when I saw the first light. Faint, far ahead. Amber. At first I thought it was a hazard flare, maybe an accident up the road, but as I drew closer, the glow multiplied. 2 lights, 4, then dozens, pulsing together in eerie rhythm. Hazard lights. I eased off the gas. My Accord hummed low as my headlights stretched forward and revealed them. A line of cars crawling down the highway at barely 20 miles an hour, at least a dozen, maybe more. Their hazard lights blinked in perfect unison, not a single one out of sync. The convoy moved like a body. My first thought was, funeral. I'd seen processions before, but never at this hour. Never on a rural highway in the dead of night. And funerals don't blink hazards in hypnotic rhythm, steady as a metronome. The cars themselves unsettled me. Old, boxy sedans from the 70s, pickups with rust-eaten wheel wells, a station wagon with faded wood paneling. Their paint was dull, chipped, eaten by weather. Their license plates were corroded, some too rusted to read. They rode low, too, like their suspensions were groaning under some impossible weight. I slowed and tucked behind them. My headlights washed over the last car in line, reflecting pale on cracked chrome. I told myself I'd stick there for a few minutes. Passing felt wrong, like cutting in front of a hearse, but the rhythm of those lights, blink, 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 clawed at my nerves. Minutes dragged, and the thought grew sharp. I can't stay here. I have to pass. Headlights bloomed in my mirror. Relief surged. Another car, closing fast. Proof I wasn't alone out here. But the relief curdled as the beams filled my rear view, riding too close, pressing me forward. Whoever was back there wanted me to move, so I did what I shouldn't have. I flicked my blinker, pulled into the opposite lane, and began to pass. The first car loomed beside me. My beams lit the driver. She was a woman, maybe mid-50s, hair pinned back neat. Her hands clamped the wheel at 10 and 2. Her eyes were open but glassy, staring straight ahead. Her skin gleamed pale, waxy, like candlelight. She didn't blink, didn't move. The passenger beside her was a man, stiff as a mannequin, chin tilted toward the roof, mouth slack. His chest didn't rise. My throat closed. I pressed the gas harder, sliding past the second car. Same thing. 2 figures, faces drained, eyes wide and unseeing. Their skin had a faint sheen, like plastic. By the third, nausea swelled. I forced my gaze forward, refusing to look, but my peripheral betrayed me. Shapes sat rigid in every seat, dozens of glassy eyes fixed straight ahead, unblinking, lips slack, heads jerking faintly in rhythm with the hazards. And then came the hearse. It was longer than any hearse I'd seen, black paint dulled by time. The windows were tinted, but shadows shifted inside. Slow, deliberate, like a crowd moving in prayer. The driver turned his head. Our eyes locked. He was alive, too alive. His eyes were wide, pupils blown, whites gleaming wet. His mouth curled into a smile, not quick, not polite, slow, deliberate. His grin stretched wider, splitting until it looked painful. He held it as I passed, his neck craning, refusing to break eye contact. My pulse thundered. Sweat slicked my hands. I pressed the gas hard, my accord groaning, pulling past the last of the line. When I cleared them, I let out a ragged breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My chest heaved, my arms shook. In the mirror, the convoy stretched behind me. Hazards blinked in unison. Then, in the span of a blink, the road was empty. No cars, no lights, nothing but asphalt and stars. I slowed, nausea churning, my eyes stung with sweat. The radio crackled. Static hissed sharp. I twisted the dial. The hiss shifted, then a voice slipped through. Low, steady. The funeral isn't over. The voice faded back to static. My breath came shallow, ragged. I pressed the gas harder, my headlights clawing deeper into the night. But beneath the hum of my engine, I heard it faint, steady, patient. The synchronized blink of hazard lights. The road stretched black and empty, but the sound wouldn't leave. It wasn't in my ears anymore. It was in my chest. A faint thump-thump, steady as a metronome, timed with the memory of those blinking hazards. I gripped the wheel tighter, my eyes darting to the mirror every few seconds. Empty. Always empty. But I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, that if I blinked too long, if I let my focus slip, they'd be there again. I told myself I just needed gas, caffeine, something to anchor me. 20 minutes later, a gas station appeared on the shoulder like a miracle. Its sign buzzed weak neon, half the letters dead, but the lights inside were on. I pulled in fast, tires crunching gravel. The fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead. A lone pickup sat parked by the ice chest, dust coating its hood. Inside, a man stood behind the counter, middle-aged, heavy-set, wiping his hands on a rag. He glanced at me, then squinted out the window at the highway. "Hell of a convoy you're running with," he muttered. My blood ran cold. "What convoy?" He frowned like I was the crazy one. "All those cars. Stretched for miles. Haven't seen a funeral that big in years." I turned to look. The highway shimmered under the buzzing lights. Empty. When I faced him again, he was already walking into the back. As if the conversation never happened. I didn't pump gas. I bolted. Back on the road, my hands trembled on the wheel. My mouth was dry, my heart stuttering. I checked the mirror every few seconds. Empty. Always empty. And then the glow returned. Amber hazards, dozens of them. They pulsed in unison, steady, patient. Too far to touch me, close enough to let me know I wasn't free. I pressed the gas harder. 80. 90. The glow never faded. I veered onto a side road, gravel spraying, headlights bouncing off fence posts. The track wound into fields. No markers. No signs. When I finally rejoined the highway miles later, the road stretched black and empty. Relief surged, but in the rear view, the glow returned, exactly where it had been. I swore aloud, my voice raw. "What do you want from me?" The hazards didn't answer. They only blinked. The clock on my dash froze. 12 is ears. It had been 12 for guests for hours. My phone battery stayed locked at 3%, no matter how long the screen glowed. Time wasn't moving. I drove until my body gave out. My eyelids sagged. The car wavered across the lines. Finally, I pulled to the shoulder, killed the engine, and sagged against the wheel. For a moment, silence. Then the sound returned. The synchronized blink, loud, close, inside the car. My head snapped up. The convoy surrounded me. Dozens of vehicles lined the road on either side, hazards pulsing in rhythm. Their passengers sat stiff in every seat, glassy eyes unblinking, mouths slack. The smell hit me. Exhaust and something older, sour, like soil turned over at a grave. Directly in front of me, a hearse idled. Its driver's door creaked open. Figures stepped out. Pale, waxen, dressed in black. They moved in perfect unison, shoes crunching gravel in the same rhythm as the hazards. 4 of them carried a coffin. They lowered it onto the asphalt in my headlights, black wood polished, gleaming with every blink. My name was carved into the lid. Daniel Price. My stomach dropped. My knees buckled. I staggered back against the car, shaking my head. No. No, no, no. The hearse driver stepped forward. The same man I'd seen earlier. His grin stretched too wide, eyes unblinking. He raised one hand and beckoned. The coffin lid creaked. Something shifted inside. A breath. Ragged, sharp. My breath. I stumbled back, hitting the cold steel of my Accord. My pulse thundered, every nerve screaming to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The hazard blink quickened. Faster, louder. The pale passengers lined the highway, their heads turning toward me in unison. Their mouths moved, slow and soundless, forming words I couldn't hear. The coffin lid slammed shut. My headlights died. The world dropped into black. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then I felt it. The coffin wasn't in front of me anymore. It was around me, wood pressing against my shoulders, darkness pressing into my eyes. I screamed. My fist pounded against the lid, my throat shredded, my chest heaving. And in that suffocating dark, my voice echoed back. It wasn't me anymore. It was them. The synchronized blink thumped through the wood, louder, faster, until it filled me completely. The funeral wasn't theirs. It was mine. I left Las Vegas with the kind of headache that feels like punishment. The strip was still glowing behind me when I merged onto the highway. Neon towers buzzing in the mirror like a hangover you can't shake. My friends had flown back to Denver that morning, their laughter and their pointed silences both still ringing in my ears. I couldn't afford the flight, couldn't afford much of anything after the weekend I'd had, so I told them I'd drive back alone. I pretended I liked the solitude, pretended the open road was what I wanted, but really, I couldn't face another hour trapped beside them, pretending they didn't blame me for losing half our money at the blackjack table. My Civic rattled the way it always did at high speeds, the heater pushing air that smelled faintly of burnt dust and old grease. I rolled the window down just enough to let the desert air slap my face. It was cold, sharper than I expected for late fall, and it kept me awake for a while. The road stretched flat and endless. 2 skinny lanes painted across an ocean of black. Once the glow of the city was gone, there was nothing. No houses, no signs, not even the outline of mountains. Just asphalt and starlight and the steady hum of tires eating mile after mile. I tried the radio, anything to break the silence, but every station was static. Not the kind that fades in and out, but thick, constant hiss. I kept twisting the dial, desperate. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swore I heard voices hidden under the noise. A man yelling, a woman sobbing, words too muffled to understand. Once, I could have sworn someone whispered my name. I snapped the dial off after that and sat in silence, telling myself I was tired, that my brain was playing tricks. For almost 2 hours, I didn't see another soul. No headlights in the mirror, no taillights ahead. My eyes burned, and I chewed sunflower seeds to keep my jaw moving, spitting husks into an old water bottle. The desert stretched on, empty and endless, and that's when I saw the first car. Its taillights glowed faint red on the shoulder. The body of the sedan angled awkwardly against the sand. I slowed, instinct telling me maybe someone needed help. The headlights were still on, the engine idling low, the driver's door wide open. A jacket lay crumpled across the seat. A half-empty water bottle rolled on the floor. A phone charger glowed faintly, but there was no phone, no driver. The dome light buzzed weakly, illuminating an empty cabin. I passed with my stomach tight, eyes darting between the open door and the empty seat. Maybe they'd walked to get help. Maybe a friend had picked them up. But where? Out here, there was nothing in either direction for miles. 10 minutes later, another. This one angled nose first into the ditch, hazard lights blinking slow and uneven. The driver's seat was empty again. Both back doors stood open. A child's car seat sat strapped in the rear, its harness buckled neatly with nothing inside. I pressed the gas, my pulse thumping harder than it should have. Then the third. A minivan, parked square on the shoulder, with its lights burning straight across the blacktop. Both front seats were empty, but the dome light glowed inside. A McDonald's bag sat on the dash, grease soaking through the bottom. 2 drinks sweated in the cup holders, lids still sealed, straws poking out. The food looked fresh, steam fogging the inside of the windshield. The van hummed like it had just been parked, like its owners had stepped out only seconds before. But no one was there. The fourth was a pickup, hood dented, windshield cracked, country music playing faintly through the open driver's window. The seatbelt was buckled tight across nothing, pulled snug like it was holding someone in place. But the seat was empty. By then my chest ached, and my throat felt dry no matter how many times I swallowed. I gripped the wheel and told myself not to stop, not to look at the next one, just keep driving until I hit a town. But curiosity has teeth, and when the fifth appeared, I slowed anyway. It was a silver SUV parked neat and square on the shoulder. The engine idled steady, exhaust puffing pale against the dark. All 4 doors were closed, windows rolled up, but the headlights cast a strange glow on the pavement. The asphalt ahead looked darker, wet. I pulled onto the shoulder behind it, left my Civic idling and stepped out. The desert air was sharp and dry, my breath fogging faintly as I walked forward. Gravel crunched under my shoes. The SUV's lights hummed across the road, and I saw it clearly now, the patch of asphalt shimmering faintly, not like water, not like heat, but like something under the surface was moving. I crouched, heart pounding. The pavement looked slick, too dark, too soft. I touched it with my fingertips. It was warm. The desert was in the 40s, cold enough to sting my ears, but the asphalt burned under my hand, like skin left in the sun. I jerked back, breath caught in my throat. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I lowered my ear toward the surface and froze. I heard voices, dozens of them, layered, muffled, echoing up through the ground. Men shouting, women begging, a child sobbing, distorted, like a crowd trapped just beneath the surface. My breath shook, my stomach twisting. Then, cutting through the rest, one voice rose clear. It whispered my name. I scrambled back, heart hammering, shoes sliding in gravel. My chest heaved, every nerve lit with panic. I spun, sprinted for the Civic, and yanked the door shut. My hand shook as I shoved the gear into drive. The tires squealed, but for a moment they didn't feel like they were spinning on pavement. They felt stuck, gripped, like something curled around the rubber and refused to let go. Then, with a jolt, they broke free. The Civic lurched forward, headlights spilling down the highway. My breath came ragged, my eyes wide. In the mirror, the SUV sat neat and still, its headlights glowing across that patch of road. And in the glow, the asphalt rippled. Not like water. Like something alive, sliding just beneath the surface. I drove for what felt like hours, my hands locked on the wheel so tightly my fingers ached. My Civic hummed low, engine straining, but no matter how fast I pressed it, the desert didn't change. The horizon stayed black and flat, the stars frozen sharp above me, and the road stretched forward like it had no end. My pulse still thudded hard in my ears, and every time I blinked, I saw that patch of asphalt rippling in the SUV's headlights. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it, that I was exhausted, maybe half asleep, but the memory of the voices wouldn't leave. They hadn't sounded like dreams. They'd sounded alive, real. People crying beneath the ground, one voice whispering my name. The sound still clung to my skull, echoing under my skin like I'd pressed my ear to a grave. The radio crackled again. I hadn't touched the dial since I shut it off earlier, but the speakers hissed with static. I turned the volume down, but the noise only sharpened. Buried under it were voices. Clearer now. Don't stop. Help us. He's next. I slammed the radio off, but the voices lingered in the cabin, not through the speakers, through the car itself, through the road beneath my tires. My throat went dry, but I pressed the gas harder. 80. 90. The Civic rattled, dashboard trembling. I needed to find a town, a gas station, any sign of life. And then I saw them. More cars. One after another pulled off the shoulder. Engines humming, headlights burning. Some doors open, some closed. All empty. The first was a hatchback with the trunk up. Groceries spilled across the pavement. A carton of eggs broken. Milk jug leaking into the dirt. Cans rolled into the ditch. The second was a sedan. Hazard lights blinking. Baby stroller folded neatly beside it. The third was a pickup with a toolbox open in the bed. Tools scattered like someone had been working and vanished mid-task. I slowed against my better judgment, eyes flicking from car to car. They were fresh. Engines idling steady, headlights bright. None of them looked abandoned for long. I told myself to keep moving, just keep driving. But at the fourth, my courage broke again. It was a dark blue station wagon, angled across the shoulder. All four doors were shut. Headlights cast wide across the road, but the pavement ahead shimmered. Darker, slick, shifting faintly. My stomach twisted. I tightened my grip on the wheel. And that's when it happened. The Civic jerked. The steering wheel wrenched hard left, and I fought to keep it straight. My tires screamed against the asphalt, but it wasn't like hitting ice or gravel. It was like something was holding them, pulling. The car slowed even though my foot was jammed on the accelerator. The engine roared, but the speedometer dropped. 60, 50, 40. My chest seized. The wheel vibrated under my palms like it was alive. And then the sound came, muffled, low, rising through the tires, through the frame, into my bones. Voices, hundreds of them, pressed together, begging, screaming, laughing. All at once, layered, spilling up through the rubber, like the road itself was a throat. I screamed and slammed the wheel, jerking right, flooring the gas. With a horrible ripping sound, the Civic tore free. The tires spat chunks of black, strips of something thick and sticky clinging to the treads before flying off into the dark. The car lurched forward. My heart hammered. My chest ached. I didn't dare slow. But the road wasn't finished. Shadows moved under the surface. I saw them in my headlights just for a second. Shapes pressed up from beneath the asphalt, stretching it like glass. Human faces. Their mouths open wide in silent screams, eyes distorted, features twisted. Dozens of them, rising and falling with every ripple. My breath hitched. I couldn't look. I couldn't blink. But in the corner of my vision, I saw one face clearer than the rest. It was mine. I swerved so hard the Civic nearly spun. Gravel sprayed as I tore onto the shoulder, skidding before I yanked it back straight. My chest seized, lungs burning. The faces sank back under the road. The asphalt smoothed over, black and still. I wanted to stop, to get out, to collapse in the sand and never drive again. But the thought of standing barefoot on that ground, of feeling it pulse under me, was worse. So I drove. Minutes bled into hours. My dash clock flickered 12, over and over, never changing. My phone battery was still stuck at 3%. Time wasn't moving. And then the whisper came. Not from the radio, not from the tires, from the seat beside me. Ethan. I froze. My foot slipped from the gas. My head turned slow, terrified. The passenger seat was empty, but the seat belt was buckled, tight, pulled across nothing. The buckle clicked open. The belt slid back slow, curling like it had released something unseen. My skin crawled. I slammed my foot back on the gas, but I could feel it now, the weight beside me. Invisible, pressing into the cushion, the faint smell of asphalt and hot tar filling the cabin. I drove blind, panic rising. My headlights caught another car on the shoulder. A silver sedan, door hanging open. Headlights burning across the road. And in that glow, the pavement rippled. Not like water, like something waiting. The Civic shuddered. The wheel jerked again. My tires screamed. This time, when I hit the gas, nothing happened. The engine roared, but the car slowed. 30, 20, 10. The asphalt bubbled beneath me, swelling like a lung, inhaling. My tires sank an inch, then two, the black surface curling up around the rubber. I screamed and shoved the door open, bolting into the night. Gravel cut my palms as I fell, scrambling to my feet. Behind me, the Civic groaned, metal creaking as the road pulled it down. The headlights flickered, sputtered, then vanished as the car sank nose first into the asphalt like it was mud. The sound was sickening, wet and heavy, until the surface smoothed over, flat and black again. Nothing remained. No car. No sound. Just road. I staggered back, chest heaving, tears stinging my eyes. My Civic was gone, erased. The desert was silent. And then faint, rising through the ground, I heard it. My own voice. Help me. I've done more cross-country drives than I can count. I used to sell home security systems, which meant I spent weeks at a time behind the wheel, rolling through states I'd only ever seen on postcards. I learned quick that when you're out on the road long enough, gas stations stop being conveniences. They become lifelines. When the tank dips close to empty and your eyelids weigh more than the steering wheel, that flicker of fluorescent light on the shoulder feels like salvation. You trust those places. You have to. That's what I told myself the night I found the station on Route 77 in Oklahoma. It was close to 1 a.m. I'd been driving since noon, too stubborn to stop at a motel because I wanted to make Amarillo before sunrise. The highway stretched empty, nothing but black fields and the occasional road sign flashing by. My Civic was running on fumes, the gas light burning angry red. My phone had no signal. I was rehearsing what I'd do if I broke down out there, how far I'd have to walk when the glow appeared. Neon. At first I thought it was a mirage, some trick of my tired brain, but the closer I got, the clearer it became. A gas station perched on the edge of nowhere, its sign buzzing faintly in the dark. The canopy lights above the pumps hummed, pale moths circling lazily. The lot was half full. 3 or 4 cars parked neatly, engines off, their windshields fogged faintly, like someone had just stepped inside. Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. I pulled in fast, tires crunching gravel, and parked by the pump. The price on the sign made no sense. $1.29 for regular. But my tank was gasping, and I told myself, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they hadn't updated the board in years. The station looked old but alive. Windows glowed warm. A faint hum of fluorescent lights spilled through the glass. I slid out of the car, stretched my stiff legs, and walked toward the door. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. The cars in the lot. Their license plates were faded. Not just dirty, faded. Some had numbers I didn't recognize, old color patterns that hadn't been used since the 90s. Their tires looked worn to the threads, but the windows were fogged, like someone had only recently shut them off. I hesitated, then shook my head. I was tired. My brain was making patterns out of shadows. The glass door creaked when I opened it. A bell above it jingled faintly. though the sound seemed dull like it was underwater. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and something older, sour underneath, like milk left too long in the sun. The shelves were full, though, every row stacked with chips, candy, soda. The hum of coolers filled the back. A coffee pot steamed on the counter. And the people. There were 5 of them scattered through the store, a woman in a blue coat by the chip aisle, 2 men standing near the back cooler, a kid, maybe 20, by the soda fountain, and the clerk behind the counter. Every single one of them turned their head when I walked in. Not a glance, a full turn, in perfect silence, like they'd been waiting. Their eyes fixed on me for just a second too long before drifting back to whatever they'd been staring at. The clerk smiled. His teeth were white, too white. His uniform was crisp, the kind you'd see in an old photo. Green vest, with a red patch over the chest that just said, in fading thread, service. "Evening," he said, voice smooth, rehearsed. I nodded, muttered a thanks, and moved toward the coolers. I needed caffeine. Anything to keep me awake. That's when I noticed the products. The cans of soda on the shelf looked normal enough until I picked one up. The label was faded. The logo was one I hadn't seen since high school. The expiration date printed on the bottom read APR 1997. I frowned, grabbed another. Same. A bag of chips crinkled in my hand, its design long retired, the kind I remembered from when I was a kid. Every item I touched felt wrong. Too stiff. Too heavy. I looked back at the others. The woman in the coat was staring at the chips on the shelf, but her hand hadn't moved. The men at the cooler hadn't opened it. The kid by the soda fountain was holding a cup under the spout, but nothing poured. They weren't shopping. They were waiting. I forced myself back to the counter, my throat dry. The clerk smiled wider, though his eyes didn't move. "Late night?" he asked. "Yeah," I muttered. "On my way to Amarillo." His smile widened, just slightly. "Long drive." The way he said it made me pause, like he already knew where I was going, like he'd been waiting for me. I fished for my wallet, desperate to just pay for the gas and leave. But when I looked down at the register, my stomach flipped. A stack of magazines sat neatly on the counter. The top one had today's date, but the year was 1987. My hand shook. I shoved a 20 across the counter and muttered for pump 4. The clerk's fingers brushed mine as he took it. His skin was cold. Too cold. He didn't look down at the bill. He didn't look at the register. He just smiled. "Fill her up," he said softly. I backed toward the door, the bell jingling faint when I pushed it open. The air outside was sharp, colder than before. I hurried to the pump, jammed the nozzle into the tank, my eyes darting to the glass windows. The people inside were still, silent, watching. The pump clicked full. I yanked it out, tossed it back, slid into the driver's seat. Relief washed over me as the engine turned. I pulled out of the lot fast, gravel spitting under my tires. The neon glow faded behind me. My headlights cut across the empty highway again. I laughed once, sharp and nervous. Just a weird old station. Maybe I'd wandered into some historic throwback place. Maybe fatigue was making me paranoid. I drove for 20 minutes, 30, 40. The desert rolled past. My gas gauge ticked down. My eyes burned. I told myself I'd stop at the next exit, find a motel, shake this off. And then I saw it. The neon glow, buzzing faint against the horizon. The same canopy lights. The same half-full lot. The same sign flickering above the pumps. I slowed, heart thudding. My hands trembled on the wheel. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. But as I pulled closer, the cars were the same. Their faded plates, their fogged windows. And through the glass of the store, I saw them. The same people. Waiting. I sat there in the middle of the empty highway, staring at the impossible glow ahead. My hands clenched the wheel, sweat slicking the leather. I had driven 40 minutes away from that station, maybe more, but there it was again. buzzing faint and steady like it had been waiting the whole time. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow, my pulse thudding in my ears. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." But the glow didn't vanish. The canopy lights hummed. The sign buzzed. The lot sat half full, the same crooked cars with faded plates and fogged windows. And through the glass of the store, I saw them, the same figures, standing, waiting. I pressed the gas hard, determined to pass it, to keep driving until the glow was gone. My Civic roared, tires screaming against the blacktop. I flew past the entrance, eyes locked ahead, refusing to glance at the windows. I counted the seconds, the miles. 10, 20, 30. The neon faded behind me. Relief trickled in. My shoulders loosened. My hands eased on the wheel. I told myself I'd broken it. I'd escaped whatever trick the desert was playing. I was free. And then 10 minutes later, the glow returned. Same station, same lot, same cars. My throat closed. My stomach flipped. I slammed the brakes and swerved onto the shoulder, gravel spitting under my tires. My chest heaved, my mind scrambling. I pulled out my phone. One bar of service blinked weak and faint. I dialed 911, pressing the phone to my ear like it was salvation. Static. Then a voice. "Emergency services. What's your location?" Relief surged. "I'm on Route 77, just outside." The line crackled. The operator's voice warped, breaking into distortion. "Sir, are you at the station?" My stomach dropped. "What? Are you at the station?" The line hissed. And then, beneath the static, I heard the bell. The faint jingle of the gas station door. I hung up, heart slamming. My phone screen flickered once, then went black. Dead. I threw it onto the passenger seat and sat shaking, staring at the glow ahead. My Civic hummed, the only sound in the silence. And then, from inside the cabin, another sound joined it. A whisper. Soft. Patient. Mark. My name. I whipped my head around, but the seat beside me was empty. The back seat, too. But the whisper came again, closer this time, curling in my ear like breath. Mark. I slammed the car into drive and tore forward, refusing to look at the glow, refusing to let my eyes drift to the windows of that store. I drove blind with panic, and yet, no matter how far I went, the glow never shrank. Eventually, against every instinct screaming at me, I turned into the lot again. My hands weren't even my own anymore. They moved without me, twisting the wheel, guiding me under the buzzing canopy like I'd done it 1,000 times before. My chest heaved, but my body obeyed something else. The moment my tires crunched gravel, the bell above the door jingled faint from inside. Like it had already known I'd be back. I sat frozen, gripping the wheel, refusing to move. But then my Civic shut off. The engine cut. The lights dimmed. I hadn't touched the key. The store waited. I opened the door because I had no choice. Gravel crunched under my shoes. The air smelled sour again, like spoiled milk and bleach. When I stepped inside, the same 5 figures were in the same places, standing too still, their heads turning toward me in perfect unison. The clerk smiled. His teeth were still too white, too straight, like porcelain. "Back again," he said softly. My throat tightened. I forced words out, though my voice shook. "What is this place?" He tilted his head, smile never breaking. "It's always been here." I backed toward the shelves, my eyes darting. The chips, the candy, the soda. All the same brands from decades ago. Expired. Dust clinging to the corners. But as I walked, the products shifted. Bags sagged like they were filled with wet sand. Soda cans bulged, labels peeling. One split open with a soft hiss, thick black liquid seeping across the shelf, dripping slow to the floor. I gagged, stumbling back. My shoulder hit a cooler door, and the glass fogged instantly with frost. I wiped it with my sleeve, peering inside. The freezer was full of meat, but not the kind wrapped in cellophane. These slabs were gray and bloated, veins webbing across the surface, faces pressed faintly under the skin, eyes half-formed, mouths open. I stumbled back, bile burning my throat. The woman in the blue coat was closer now, though I hadn't seen her move. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, smile carved too wide. Her lips parted. "Stay," she whispered. Her voice wasn't hers. It was mine. My own voice, spilling from her mouth, mocking, familiar. My stomach lurched. I bolted for the back hallway, slamming through a door marked "Employees Only." The room beyond was small, lit by a single buzzing bulb. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with boxes, Polaroids taped neatly in rows. I froze. Every Polaroid showed a different traveler. Men, women, children, all standing behind the counter in the same crisp green vest, the red patch reading "Service." Every single one was smiling the same forced smile. Some Polaroids were decades old, the edges yellowed. Others looked fresh, sharp, printed yesterday. The most recent one made my stomach drop. It was me, standing behind the counter, smiling. I stumbled back, my chest tight, my hands shaking. The bulb above flickered. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Slow, steady. I spun and shoved through another door, tumbling into the bathroom. The mirror above the sink cracked down the middle, the glass warped. My reflection stared back at me, but something was wrong. I was wearing the uniform, the green vest, the red patch, the word "service" stitched over my chest. My reflection smiled. I didn't. The sound of the bell jingled faint through the walls. The door opening, another customer stepping inside. And behind me, in the cracked mirror, I saw the clerk's face stretch wider. My own face now, waiting. I've been driving trucks long enough to know every corner of the Southwest. I know which stretches have the best diners, which ones have the meanest speed traps, and which ones can lull you to sleep if you aren't careful. But nothing prepared me for the highway between Klein's Corners and Moriarty, New Mexico. Locals call it the Highway of Crosses. I used to laugh at that name. I don't laugh anymore. It was late November last year. I was hauling freight east, long-haul run that started in Flagstaff and wouldn't end until Dallas. My dispatcher had stacked the schedule tight, too tight, and I was pushing myself past the point of exhaustion. I'd been chewing gum, pounding gas station coffee, doing anything to keep my eyes open. But fatigue has a way of finding you out here, and by the time I crossed into New Mexico, I was running on fumes. I was also running from guilt. My little girl had turned 10 that day. I'd promised her I'd be home for her birthday. Promised. Instead, I was hundreds of miles away, sweating behind the wheel, chasing delivery deadlines like they were more important than her smile. I told myself I was doing it for her, for my family, for the paycheck. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd chosen the road again, like I always did, and every mile felt like proof I was a lousy father. The first cross came just after midnight. It was small, white-painted wood, staked into the ground on the shoulder. A bouquet of fake roses leaned against it, their plastic petals catching my headlights. I'd seen roadside memorials before. Every driver has. They always gave me a chill, but I respected them. They were markers of grief, reminders of how fast a life can be snatched away on the asphalt. But then I saw another, and another, every 100 yards, another cross. Some were simple, plain white with nothing more than initials. Others were elaborate, carved names, dates, fresh flowers, even teddy bears tied to the wood. I slowed without meaning to, my rig humming steady, my headlights sweeping each one like a spotlight on a stage of grief. There were too many. I drove 2 miles, then 3, and they didn't stop. Cross after cross, the shoulder lined like a graveyard stretching into the horizon. Some had weathered, splintered wood, but most looked new, too new, The paint gleamed fresh. The flowers weren't wilted. The teddy bears didn't look sun-bleached or ragged. They looked like someone had placed them that day. My chest tightened. I rubbed my eyes, told myself I was overtired, seeing patterns where there weren't any. But as the minutes ticked on, the crosses kept coming. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. I'd never seen so many in my life. I slowed further, finally pulling to the shoulder. Gravel crunched under my tires. My rig hissed to a stop. The desert was silent. Cold wind whipped across the plain. My headlights illuminated the nearest cross. It had a name. Elena Martinez. Beneath it, a date. April 12th, 2021. A laminated photo was stapled to the wood. A little girl, maybe 9 or 10, her dark hair tied back with a ribbon. She was smiling wide, showing missing front teeth. My breath caught. She looked almost exactly like my daughter. I stepped down from the cab, boots crunching gravel, breath fogging in the air. The desert smelled of dust and sage, the kind of sharp scent that usually calms me. But not tonight. Tonight it smelled wrong, heavy, like the air before a storm. I crouched by the cross, fingers brushing the wood. The paint was flawless, fresh. The roses at its base smelled real. Too real. I stood quickly, turning to the next cross. James Ortega. Date, July 3rd, 2022. A Polaroid stapled beneath the name showed a man in his 30s, smiling, holding his newborn child. The photo wasn't weathered. It was crisp, clear, like it had been printed yesterday. I backed up, heart thumping. My breath came fast, shallow. My headlights stretched further down the highway, and all I saw were crosses. Row after row, endless, into the dark. I told myself to get back in the cab, to keep driving, to forget what I'd seen, but my feet carried me forward. I passed cross after cross, my boots crunching gravel. Names blurred past me. Dates stretched back decades. Photos smiled out at me, crisp and sharp no matter how old. And then I froze. The next cross bore my last name, Raymond Clark. My heart slammed, my throat closed. The date carved beneath it was tomorrow's date. My knees buckled. I staggered, clutching the wood like it could hold me upright. My chest heaved, my vision swimming. Tied to the cross was a photo, laminated, crisp. It was me. Me standing in my kitchen, holding my daughter in my arms. She was wearing the birthday crown I'd missed seeing her put on that morning. Balloons floated behind us. My wife smiled from the corner of the photo. It was a picture I'd never taken. I dropped the photo like it burned. My legs gave out and I fell to my knees in the gravel. My breaths came fast, ragged. The desert stretched silent around me, the crosses watching, lined in endless rows. I stumbled back toward my rig, fumbling with the door handle, my hands slick with sweat. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door, locked it. My chest heaved, my heart hammered. I jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring, but when my headlights cut across the road, I wished they hadn't, because the crosses weren't still anymore. In the glow of the beams, shadows moved. Figures stood by the memorials, faint, hazy but human shapes. They bent over the crosses, touched the flowers, lifted photos. They reenacted scenes I didn't want to see. A man clutched his chest and collapsed. A woman screamed silently as her car burst into phantom flames. A child stood in the road, a semi bearing down. All in silence, all in eerie pantomime, their deaths playing again and again. And among them, I saw myself. A faint shadow kneeling by the cross with my name, holding my own photo in trembling hands. My blood turned to ice. My breath caught. My body froze. The desert wasn't silent anymore. The crosses were alive. The cab rattled beneath me as I forced the rig forward, but my eyes stayed locked on the endless row of crosses. They blurred past in the headlights, white streaks against the black desert. Each one different, but all carrying the same weight. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles hurt, whispering to myself that it wasn't real. that exhaustion was twisting my brain, that I was only seeing things because I was guilty for missing my daughter's birthday. But the truth clung to me like a second skin. The crosses weren't just memorials. They were waiting. I tried to distract myself. I thought of her last party, the year before, the way she insisted I wear a stupid paper crown while she blew out her candles. I thought of my wife rolling her eyes and snapping a photo, saying one day we'd laugh about it. But all those thoughts only sharpened the guilt. I hadn't been there tonight. I had traded her smile for diesel fumes and miles of empty road. And now the road itself seemed to mock me, lined with proof that every promise I broke carried a price. For a while, I convinced myself I could just outrun it. I floored the gas, engine groaning, speedometer creeping past limits I'd never dared to push with a full trailer. The crosses whipped by, faster and faster, the desert rushing like a blur outside the windows. But no matter how fast I went, they didn't end. 10 miles, 20, 50. The rows only thickened, spreading further from the shoulder, dotting the desert like gravestones in a cemetery without walls. That's when I saw the first reenactment. At first, it was just a flicker in the headlights, a shadow bent across a cross, unmoving. But then it shifted. A woman's figure collapsed onto her knees, clutching at her throat. She convulsed, head thrown back in a silent scream, and then crumpled to the gravel. I slammed the brakes instinctively, the rig lurching, my heart hammering. But when the headlights steadied, she was gone. Only the cross remained, its white paint glowing fresh against the dark. I told myself it was fatigue. I told myself it was nothing. But a mile later, another appeared. This time, it was a man. He stumbled into the road, arms flailing, face twisted in panic. His outline glowed faint, edges blurring like smoke, but his movements were sharp enough to make me swerve. My tires screamed as I jerked the wheel, my chest seizing. The figure froze in my high beams, and then, just as suddenly, he was gone. Only the cross remained, a teddy bear tied neatly to its wood. I drove on, slower now, eyes darting from cross to cross, dread crawling up my spine. And then I saw them all at once. The roadside was alive. Dozens of shadows replayed their deaths in eerie silence. A family of 4 sat buckled in their phantom minivan, their outlines jerking as an invisible truck slammed into them. Flames burst and vanished, only to burst again, their mouths open in screams I couldn't hear. A motorcyclist skidded across phantom asphalt, his body tumbling end over end until he dissolved, only to rise again and repeat. A child ran after a ball, only to vanish beneath headlights that weren't there. Every shadow was trapped, bound to the cross it belonged to, condemned to relive the moment forever. I gripped the wheel with shaking hands, bile burning the back of my throat. My headlights caught their faces sometimes, hollow eyes, mouths frozen open, expressions carved from agony. And then they dissolved, only to return seconds later and repeat again. I wanted to look away, but my body wouldn't obey. Each reenactment stabbed at me, peeling back something raw inside. I thought of every accident I'd ever passed without stopping. Every body bag I'd seen zipped on the side of the road. Every memorial I'd ignored. Now they were all here, demanding I look, demanding I remember. And then I saw one I couldn't deny. The cross stood taller than the rest, the wood freshly painted. My headlights illuminated the name carved deep, Raymond Clark, my name, beneath it tomorrow's date. My breath caught, my chest seized, and then the reenactment began. A shadow of a semi flickered across the road. My rig, twisted, overturned. Smoke rose from phantom tires, sparks spitting as the trailer skidded, and across its crumpled front lay another car, crushed beyond recognition. Inside, faint outlines moved, 2 figures small and trembling. My wife's silhouette, my daughter's small body pressed against her seat. Their outlines convulsed in slow motion, bracing against an impact that replayed again and again. My stomach lurched. I slammed the brakes, the rig skidding sideways, tires shrieking. I stumbled from the cab, knees buckling, gravel cutting into my palms as I fell. "No," I screamed. My voice tore from my throat, raw, desperate. "No, no, no." The phantom scene played again, my rigs slamming into their car, their outlines jerking forward, my wife's arm stretching to shield our daughter. My daughter's small hand pressed against invisible glass, her mouth open in a scream that shredded me even in silence. I staggered toward it, fists raised, tears burning my eyes. "Stop it," I bellowed. "Stop, please." The shadows ignored me. The crash repeated over and over. Each time my heart broke anew. Each time I felt the weight of my failures press harder into my chest. I dropped to my knees in the gravel, sobs racking me, my body trembling so hard I thought it would snap. When I lifted my head again, the cross with my name loomed above me, and stapled to its wood was a photo. Crisp, laminated, fresh. It was me, holding my daughter in my kitchen, balloons floating in the background. A picture of the birthday I'd already missed. A picture that never existed. I tore it free, my hand shaking, and screamed into the night. My voice echoed off the desert, but no one answered. Only the crosses stood row after row, watching. I stumbled back to the rig, climbed into the cab, and slammed the door. My chest heaved, my face wet with tears. I jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring. I drove blind, desperate to flee, but no matter how far I went, the crosses didn't end. At some point, I realized the truth. These weren't memorials. They weren't markers of past deaths. They were warnings, prophecies carved into wood. And mine was waiting. Truckers trade stories the way soldiers trade scars. Most of them are exaggerations, half-truths, built from boredom and caffeine. But every once in a while, you hear one that clings to the back of your mind long after you've laughed it off. There's one about Route 285, a lonely stretch in New Mexico where sound doesn't travel. They call it the soundless zone. I'd heard the story a dozen times, always in some late-night diner, always told by a man who swore his buddy's cousin's rig had driven through it. Nobody ever admitted it was them, not until last year. That's when I learned why. It was late October. I'd been running a load of produce from Laredo up toward Denver. The schedule was brutal, and the dispatcher didn't care that the run took me across stretches of road most truckers avoid when the sun drops. I didn't argue. I needed the money. Needed to keep my head down after a messy divorce that left me half broke and half bitter. The road was the only thing I had left. By the time I hit the outskirts of Santa Fe, midnight had passed. My eyes felt like sandpaper. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. I told myself I'd make it through just one more county before pulling off at a rest stop. That was when my GPS glitched, flickering from its usual blue to a static gray before resetting. The map zoomed in, recalculating, and for the first time all night, I noticed where it wanted me to go. Highway 285, straight through the dark heart of New Mexico. I didn't think twice. It was the fastest route. And besides, I didn't believe in campfire stories. At first, it was just another stretch of highway. Blacktop stretched forever. The desert on either side like a sleeping ocean. The cab smelled of stale coffee and diesel, and the radio crackled with static no matter which station I tried. That wasn't unusual. Out here, signals died easy. What was unusual was the way the static itself faded until the radio wasn't noise at all. It was nothing. I remember twisting the dial, tapping the speaker, even checking the wires. Dead silent. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring because they're straining for something. Anything. That's when I noticed my engine. It was still running. I could see the RPMs, feel the vibrations in the pedals, but I couldn't hear it. Not the low growl of the diesel. Not the hum of the tires on asphalt. Not even the faint rattle of my loose dashboard vent. My rig had gone mute. I pressed the gas harder, panic rising. The rig responded, surging forward, but in silence. No roar, no gear shift groan, nothing. It was like I was driving in a vacuum. I tried to calm myself, told myself it was fatigue messing with my ears, some kind of late-night auditory trick. I rolled the window down, waiting for the slap of cold desert air, the rush of wind, nothing. The air hit my face, sharp and real, but soundless. I shouted just to break the silence. "Hey!" My voice didn't exist. I felt my throat strain, felt the vibration in my chest, but nothing left my lips. It was like screaming underwater, the sound smothered before it even had a chance. My chest tightened. My pulse thundered in my ears. For a split second, I considered pulling over. But fear told me to keep moving. The road behind me was just as black as the road ahead. I couldn't trust what might be waiting if I stopped. Minutes stretched, endless and hollow. My hands trembled on the wheel. My brain screamed for sound, for the smallest scrap of noise, but there was nothing. Just the weight of silence pressing into me, thick and suffocating. And then I saw the first one. A figure on the shoulder, just outside my headlights. At first, I thought it was a trick of exhaustion, a cactus shaped like a man. But as I passed, the shape sharpened. A person standing perfectly still, head turned toward me. I leaned forward, squinting, but they didn't move. No wave, no step, just watching. A mile later, another appeared, this one closer, standing at the edge of the pavement. My headlights brushed across a face. Pale, too pale, eyes locked on mine. The lips moved, slow, deliberate, forming words I couldn't hear. I pressed the gas harder. My rig lurched silent. Sweat slicked my palms. Soon they lined the road. Dozens of them, standing in silence, each one turning their head to watch me pass. Men, women, children. Some dressed in old clothes, faded and ragged, others in modern jackets and jeans. Their mouths moved, shapes of screams and pleas, but no sound followed. I gritted my teeth, stared straight ahead, tried not to look. But then one pressed against the glass of my passenger side window. I nearly lost control. The figure's face was inches from mine, pale skin stretched too tight, eyes bloodshot, mouth open wide in a scream I couldn't hear. Fingers dragged across the glass, nails leaving faint smears. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. My chest heaved. My throat burned. I wanted to scream, to blast the horn, to do anything that would make noise. But my body knew it was useless. That was when I looked in the mirror. They weren't just on the roadside anymore. They were running alongside my truck. Dozens of them, keeping pace with impossible speed, their legs pumping silently, their arms reaching, their faces pressed against the air, mouths stretching wider and wider until they looked inhuman. All silent, all screaming nothing. I slammed the wheel, swerving, desperate to shake them. But they stayed with me, gliding just outside the glass. One of them, a young boy with hollow eyes, climbed the invisible ladder of air, pressed his face against my side mirror, and mouthed something again and again. I couldn't hear it, but I could read lips. "You're next." My vision blurred. My hand shook. The road stretched endlessly forward, the figures multiplying, surrounding me in silence. And then, just ahead, I saw something that made my blood freeze. One of the figures wasn't a stranger. It was my ex-wife. She stood in the center of the road, her pale face expressionless, her lips moving soundlessly. Behind her, in the glow of my headlights, stood a smaller figure. My daughter, her tiny mouth opening and closing in a cry I couldn't hear. I slammed the brakes, my rig skidding silently across the asphalt, tires screaming in silence, the cab rattling like a shaken toy. I stopped just short of them. My breath came ragged, my body trembling. But they didn't move. They just stared. They stood in the center of the road, bathed in the pale wash of my headlights. My ex-wife, my daughter, both unmoving, both silent. Her face was as pale as moonlight, lips parting and closing with deliberate rhythm. My daughter's mouth opened wide, her small body trembling, but no sound carried across the asphalt. I pressed both hands hard against the wheel, my breath rasping in my throat. I knew they couldn't be real. They lived 3 states away. But the sight of them there, blocking my path, lips forming cries I couldn't hear, made my chest cave in. I shook my head violently. No, I mouthed. My voice didn't exist in this place, swallowed whole. My daughter lifted her hand, palm pressed outward like she was reaching for me. My headlights flickered across her eyes. They weren't right. Too dark. Too wide. A reflection of the void I'd been driving through. I couldn't drive forward. Couldn't bring myself to plow through their silhouettes. So I did the only thing I could. I opened the door. The desert air hit me like ice. No sound. My boots struck asphalt in silence. The night stretched empty and hollow, pressing against my eardrums until they ached. I stumbled toward them, hands shaking, my body desperate for any sign this wasn't happening. When I reached them, the figures flickered. My ex-wife's outline rippled like smoke. My daughter's body swayed, her small frame dissolving at the edges. Their mouths kept moving. Her words were too quick to read, a tumble of syllables swallowed by nothing. My daughters were slower. Daddy, help me. My knees nearly buckled. My chest heaved. I reached out, desperate to touch her, to feel the warmth of her small hand. My fingers passed through empty air. Her shape trembled, dissolved, and then was gone. The silence deepened. When I spun, I saw them again. Dozens of figures lining the shoulder, all of them staring. Their mouths moved in unison now, words I couldn't hear but could almost piece together from their lips. We were here. My throat closed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I backed toward the cab, fumbling with the handle, scrambling inside. I slammed the door, locked it, gripped the wheel like it might save me. My chest rattled with each breath. My eyes darted to the mirrors. They hadn't stayed behind. They were running alongside the truck again. Men, women, children, figures gliding just beyond the glass. Their faces slammed against the windows, mouths stretched wider than jaws should allow, teeth bared in silent screams. Hands clawed at the air, fingernails dragging invisible lines down the glass. I floored the gas. The engine roared. Or it should have. The speedometer climbed, but the silence never broke. Asphalt blurred beneath me. Desert rushed past, but there was no sound. Only the figures keeping pace, their eyes locked on me. I tried to drown them out, tried to remind myself this was impossible. I slammed the radio on. Dead silence. I blasted the horn. Nothing. I screamed until my throat tore raw, but I heard nothing. The zone ate every sound whole. And then something new happened. A figure climbed the air. Like a puppet on invisible strings, one of the silhouettes lifted from the ground, its legs kicking uselessly as it rose level with my driver's side window. Its face slammed against the glass, pale skin stretched thin, black eyes boring into mine. Its lips moved, slow and deliberate. "You don't leave." I swerved, trying to shake it, but it clung to the invisible current outside, keeping pace, mouthing the same words again and again. "You don't leave." Another joined it, then another. Faces pressed against every window, pale skin cracking, mouths opening wider until their jaws split unnaturally. My cab was surrounded, a cocoon of screaming faces I couldn't hear. I pressed harder on the gas. 80, 90. The rig shook violently, trailer rattling, the wheel fighting my grip. My vision swam, heart pounding, throat burning from useless screams. And then, just ahead, I saw a wreck. 2 cars, twisted together in the center of the road. Smoke rose in silent plumes. Figures slumped inside, their bodies convulsing in eerie reenactments. Mouths moved, heads jerked, arms flailed. I swerved hard, tires screeching in silence, barely missing the phantom crash. But the vision lingered in my mirrors. And behind it, more wrecks appeared. An endless chain of collisions, trucks and cars mangled together, lining the soundless zone. Each one replaying silently, each one an accident trapped in time. I forced myself to focus forward. I could still get out. I had to. That's when the first sound returned. At first, I thought it was my imagination. A faint whisper in the cab, but it grew louder, sharper, until I recognized it. Screaming, not one scream, thousands. Layered, endless, a tidal wave of agony pouring into my ears. My head pounded, my eardrums seared, blood trickling down my jaw. I clutched my head, eyes watering, but the noise only grew, and underneath it, one voice cut through. High-pitched, small, familiar. "Daddy!" My daughter's scream. I snapped my head toward the passenger seat. She sat there, her body pale, her eyes black, her mouth wide open, in a cry I could finally hear. Her hands clutched the seatbelt, knuckles white, tears streaming down her silent face in the form of black streaks. I reached for her, my chest breaking, but the moment my fingers brushed her arm, she dissolved into smoke. The scream stayed. The rig swerved, my vision blurring. The road twisted ahead, lined with figures, each one now shrieking at full volume. The silence had broken, but not with life. With every scream the zone had ever stolen. They poured into me, filling my skull until I thought it would crack. And in that final moment, as my rig barreled forward, I understood. The soundless zone doesn't just mute sound, it keeps it, hoards it. Every scream from every wreck, every plea, every last cry before impact. It collects them, grows fat on them, and feeds them back to the ones it chooses. The last thing I remember was the wall of sound tearing through me. My daughter's voice tangled in the thousands, all crying at once. And then the figures, pressed against my windshield, their mouths wide, their words finally clear. "Now you stay." There are highways that feel alive. You don't need anyone to tell you which ones. You know it when the air changes, when the silence in the cab presses on your chest, when every mile feels heavier than the last. Some truckers will joke about it. Others won't say a word. But if you spend enough nights on the road, you start to feel it too. That difference between empty blacktop and a stretch that doesn't belong to the living anymore. I learned that lesson on I-40, just past Tucumcari, New Mexico. Truckers call it the Divide. I didn't know the name that night. For me, it was just another run, another deadline I'd promised to make. I'd left Flagstaff that morning, hauling dry freight east, chasing the kind of paycheck that only comes when dispatchers know you won't say no. My life was already falling apart back then. A divorce in the rear view, a daughter I barely saw anymore, and debts that stacked faster than I could chip them down. The road was the only place that made sense. Mile markers instead of arguments, diesel instead of silence in an empty apartment. By the time I hit Tucumcari, I'd been awake close to 20 hours. My eyes burned like sandpaper, and every blink felt longer than it should. I kept slapping my thigh, chewing gum until my jaw hurt, anything to stay sharp. The heater blew lukewarm air, rattling in the vents, but it couldn't shake the chill that comes when desert winter settles in. Outside, the sky looked carved from glass, every star burning like a pinprick of ice. The CB had gone quiet hours earlier. Not unusual this far out. Sometimes you roll 100 miles before another driver even comes close. The radio was no better. I twisted the dial back and forth, hunting for something to keep me awake, but all I got was static. Then even that faded, leaving only the low hum of the engine and the hiss of tires on blacktop, the kind of silence that makes you start hearing things that aren't there. I leaned forward on the wheel, told myself I'd pull off at the next exit, grab coffee, maybe a nap, but the exits never came. Just flat desert, blacktop stretching straight as a blade, and the long ache of fatigue digging deeper into my bones. That's when I saw the headlights. 2 small points of light appeared on the horizon, faint but steady, way out in the opposing lane. Relief washed through me like a jolt of caffeine. Out here, another set of headlights is proof the world hasn't forgotten you. I sat up straighter, waiting for the car to pass, already rehearsing the little nod or wave truckers give each other in the night. But the longer I watched, the stranger it felt. The lights didn't bounce. They didn't sway with the pavement. They glided, perfectly smooth, like they weren't tied to tires touching asphalt. I frowned, rubbed my eyes, convinced I was too tired to trust them. But the lights grew closer. 2 became 4. 4 became 6. By the time I realized what I was looking at, my breath had caught in my chest. It wasn't one car. It was dozens. A line of vehicles stretched down the opposite side of the highway, headlights burning steady, moving at the exact same speed as me. At first, it almost felt comforting, company on a road that had been empty for too long. But when my high beams swept across the first car, my stomach turned. The sedan was mangled, the hood crumpled like paper, windshield spider-webbed with cracks. Rust ate through the doors, paint flaking in strips. It looked like it had been sitting in a junkyard for decades, yet it rolled smooth, steady, perfectly aligned with the lane. Inside, a driver slumped against the wheel. His skin was pale, his eyes open but glassy, fixed on nothing. I gripped the wheel tighter. My mouth went dry. I told myself it was a trick of the light, fatigue pulling shadows into shapes. But then another car passed. A pickup, roof crushed inward. A woman sat in the driver's seat, hair matted dark, face twisted in a scream that never ended. Her head turned as she rolled by. Her hollow eyes locked on me. I swore under my breath, shaking my head. "I'm just tired," I muttered, though even my own voice sounded small. But the convoy kept coming. One after another, vehicles rolled silently alongside me. Burnt-out trucks, shattered vans, a school bus with windows blown, seats inside filled with pale faces staring straight ahead. Every one bore the marks of a crash, crumpled steel, smeared glass. Passengers frozen in whatever pose death had left them in, and every single head turned toward me as they passed. I pressed the gas, heart pounding, but no matter how fast I went, the convoy stayed with me. Dozens of vehicles stretching into the dark, headlights glowing like eyes of something ancient and patient. I tried not to look. I tried to fix my gaze on the road ahead, but curiosity gnawed at me, forced my eyes sideways. I recognized some of them. A rig with my old company's logo on the trailer, cab twisted from a rollover. Inside, the driver slumped against the window, his pale face smeared with blood. A man I'd known, a man who died 5 years back on this very stretch of I-40. A red SUV I remembered from a crash report years ago, the kind you shake your head at when you see the photos. His driver's seat was still filled, his head lolled back, throat torn open, eyes unblinking. Every vehicle carried someone, some fresh, some rotted, all watching me. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles burned white. My chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. Sweat slicked my skin, though the cab was freezing. And then, halfway down the line, I saw it. A silver Toyota Corolla. Front caved in, windshield cracked. My ex-wife's car. I almost veered off the road. Through the shattered glass, I saw her face. Too pale. Blood streaked across her cheek. Her eyes were open wide, staring at me, unblinking. And in the back seat, my daughter. Her small body leaned against the seatbelt, her head tilted wrong, lips parted, as though she'd been crying when the world ended. I bit down on a scream, choking on bile. My vision blurred. I shook my head hard, slammed the heel of my hand against the wheel, desperate to wake up, but the car didn't vanish. It rolled past, headlights glowing, carrying the two people I loved most in the world, dead and staring straight into me. Tears spilled hot down my face. My chest convulsed. My body shook so violently I thought I'd lose control of the rig. It couldn't be real. They were alive, hundreds of miles away. I'd spoken to my daughter just 2 nights ago, listened to her laugh about her school project. But the sight of her body in that back seat branded itself into me, seared into my brain in a way no denial could erase. I forced my eyes forward, breath tearing in and out. The road stretched black and endless. My vision tunneled. My heart hammered until my ribs hurt. But the convoy wasn't done. More vehicles rolled past, each more grotesque than the last. A station wagon with flames still licking through broken windows. A bus with every passenger's face turned outward, eyes hollow, mouths open in screams I couldn't hear. An 18-wheeler crumpled like a soda can. Its driver's chest caved in, his pale hand pressed against the glass. And then I saw it. Not her car this time, not theirs. Mine. A rig rolled silently in the opposing lane, perfectly parallel to me. The same make, the same color, the same trailer. But the cab was mangled beyond recognition, glass shattered, steel folded in on itself. Inside, slumped over the wheel, was me. Blood streaked my face. My eyes were open, glassy, staring through me like I wasn't there at all. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. My hands shook so violently, the wheel rattled. My chest seized until I couldn't breathe. My body screamed to slam the brakes, to pull over, to do anything but keep driving. But I couldn't stop watching, because as the wrecked twin of my rig passed, my dead self turned its head, and it smiled. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My hands locked on the wheel, my chest seizing, my eyes fixed on the wreck that rolled beside me. My own truck, my own body slumped inside, bloody and broken, eyes glassy but somehow alive enough to turn and smile. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My throat was stone. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The convoy stretched endless on both sides now. A river of death flowing parallel to me, headlights glowing like pale lanterns in the void. Every vehicle carried someone. Every head turned toward me. I couldn't hear them, but their mouths moved, syllables forming with perfect unison. I knew what they were saying before my mind wanted to admit it. Join us. I forced my eyes back to the road. My knuckles ached on the wheel. The highway stretched flat and black, but something was changing. The white line dividing lanes began to blur, glowing faintly like heat rising off asphalt. My stomach dropped. The road wasn't separating us anymore. It was merging. I pressed the gas, the rig lurching forward, trailer rattling behind me. The speedometer climbed past numbers I had no business touching with 40 tons in tow, but the convoy stayed with me. Vehicles glided effortlessly, silent wheels spinning, mangled steel keeping perfect pace. And slowly, lane by lane, they shifted closer. First, the shoulder vanished, then the median, then the faint white line that should have divided living from dead. I blinked hard, sweat burning my eyes, but the line didn't return. The convoy wasn't beside me anymore. It was with me. The school bus rattled past my mirrors, its windows filled with hollow-eyed children, their faces pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent wails. A burnt sedan drifted closer, scraping phantom sparks along the side of my trailer, though I felt no impact. Inside, a man with half a jaw turned to me, lips mouthing so soon. I gritted my teeth, muttering to myself, "Not real, not real, not real." My own voice sounded foreign. But when I glanced into the driver's side mirror, my breath froze. My dead self was still there, still driving the wrecked twin of my truck, still matching every movement, still smiling. Only now, its lips moved. Words I could read even if I didn't want to. Almost there. My vision blurred, my chest convulsed. My daughter's face burned behind my eyes. Her laughter on the phone, her tiny hand squeezing mine the last time I dropped her off. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, desperate to shake the image, desperate to believe she was still alive. But the highway wouldn't let me forget. Because just ahead, the convoy shifted again. And there it was. The Corolla. Crumpled. Shattered. My ex-wife's body leaned against the wheel, blood streaking her face. My daughter in the back seat, her head tilted wrong, lips parted. Both of them staring at me with glassy, unblinking eyes. My throat tore as I tried to scream. My chest heaved so violently, I nearly lost control of the rig. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching, the cab rattling like it might come apart. The rig fishtailed across blacktop, but when I looked around, every lane, every shoulder, every stretch of road was filled with the dead. The convoy wasn't beside me anymore. It was all around. And still, the line of headlights stretched infinite into the night. I don't remember when the first sound came. Maybe it had been there all along, buried beneath panic. But slowly, faintly, the silence cracked. Not with engines, not with tires, with whispers. Thousands of voices layered on top of each other, spilling into the cab, faint at first, then rising. I gripped the wheel, my skin crawling. Every voice carried the same word, over and over, weaving into a chant that shook the air. Join, join, join. The convoy pressed closer, ghost steel scraping against my rig, pale faces pressed to phantom glass, mouths opening wider, the chant spilling louder until it wasn't whispers anymore. It was screams, a tidal wave of sound crashing through me, so loud it drowned thought, so loud it felt like it could tear me apart from the inside out. I clutched my head, blood hot in my ears, eyes watering, but the screams only grew, and then through all of them, I heard one voice I knew. Daddy! I snapped my head toward the passenger seat. My daughter sat there, pale, eyes dark, lips trembling. Tears streaked her face, leaving black stains that smeared her cheeks. Her voice cut through the storm of thousands. Daddy, don't crash. I reached for her, tears blinding me. I won't. I swear, I won't. But my hand passed through her. She dissolved like smoke. Her voice lingered for a heartbeat, then vanished. The rig swerved hard, tires howling against asphalt. My body shook with sobs, my throat raw, but I forced myself back to the wheel. The convoy pressed tighter, vehicles sliding into my lane, headlights blinding, screams splitting the air. And then the world broke. The asphalt cracked open down the center line, glowing white like molten steel. The road split, peeling apart, one side sliding left, the other right. The divide opening like a wound in the desert. My rig straddled it, wheels skidding, trailer lurching as sparks shot up in blinding showers. On the left, the convoy of the dead rolled steady, headlights bright, eyes hollow. On the right, nothing but endless blacktop stretching empty and alone. I slammed the brakes, fighting the wheel, trying to keep to the right, but the rig lurched left. Tires screamed, cab tilted, and for one blinding second I thought it was over. And then I saw it. Myself. In the wrecked twin of my truck, already on the dead side, already grinning, already waiting. His lips moved one last time, the words clear even in the chaos. Welcome home. The divide swallowed me whole. There are stretches of highway where the air feels different, where the silence is too heavy and the dark presses down like a weight. Truckers know them. Some call them cursed. Others say it's just exhaustion, but the stories spread anyway. If you run enough nights, you hear the same whispers repeated in diners and fuel stops. For the Appalachian stretch of I-77 near Fancy Gap, Virginia, the whispers are about the fog. It rolls in thick and white, sudden as a slammed door, and truckers call it a graveyard in the clouds. Too many wrecks. Too many lives lost on those slopes. But there's another name you hear if the conversation runs late enough, after the laughter dies down and the coffee goes cold. They call it mile marker 0. I never believed in that kind of thing. I chalked every story up to fatigue, to lonely minds tricking themselves on the road. But last winter, hauling steel out of Ohio, I found myself on that very stretch, and I learned what mile marker 0 really means. It was close to midnight when I hit the mountains. The grade rose steep beneath my rig, the loaded trailer pulling hard against the engine. The sky was a black lid overhead, stars hidden behind cloud. Then, like someone pouring milk over the world, the fog came. 1 minute I had a clear view of the road. The next I was boxed in by white. I flipped the defrost higher, wipers thumping steadily, but my high beams only turned the fog into a glowing wall. My world shrank to the narrow ribbon of asphalt directly ahead of me. The rest swallowed whole. The CB had gone quiet miles back, which wasn't unusual this late, but the silence felt thicker here. Even the usual hum of passing drivers, the check-ins, the warnings about speed traps, gone. It was just me, my rig, and the low rumble of diesel. The silence pressed too close, so I twisted the radio knob, hunting for anything. Static hissed. A half-second of country twang. Static again. Then nothing. I turned it off. Better silence than the sound of voices warping into nonsense. I leaned forward, squinting into the haze until the green glow of a reflective milepost sign broke through. White numbers printed across it. 112. I muttered it under my breath to lock it in my head. It's something I always do. Count the miles. It grounds you when the road stretches endless. 10 minutes later, another green post appeared. 112. I frowned, gripping the wheel tighter. I knew I hadn't turned around. I was still headed south, the grade still rising, but the number hadn't changed. I told myself it was fatigue, that maybe I'd misread it, that the fog was making everything look the same. Then another appeared. 112. My throat tightened. The fog thickened the deeper I went, swirling so close it felt alive. Condensation crawled down the glass, and every few seconds I had to swipe the windshield with my sleeve just to see. Shapes seemed to ripple in the mist. Trees, rocks, shadows, but the way they shifted made my skin crawl. I told myself I'd pull off if I saw an exit, get some coffee, stretch, maybe even catch an hour of sleep, but the road gave me nothing. Just blacktop stretching forward, milepost after milepost, everyone stamped 112. Then, faint through the haze, I saw light. Red neon buzzing weakly against the fog. The shape of a sign came into focus. Pit stop market. Relief hit me like a shot of caffeine. Civilization. A place to breathe. I pulled off, tires crunching wet gravel. The canopy above the pumps flickered, buzzing with electricity. Only 2 pumps stood there, rusted and peeling. The convenience store squatted low, its paint chipped, windows dark. One pickup sat parked crooked at the edge of the lot, windshield fogged from the inside. I killed the engine and climbed down, boots crunching on gravel. The air was sharp, heavy with damp cold. Even my footsteps sounded muffled, swallowed by fog. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The store was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of life. Shelves lined the walls, but they were bare. Dust thick enough to leave streaks when my jacket brushed past. The refrigerators hummed faintly, but when I tugged one open, there was nothing inside except a single bottle of water, label half peeled. I froze when I noticed the man behind the counter. At first, I thought he was just standing too still. He wore a faded uniform shirt with a name tag I couldn't read. His skin was pale, almost waxy. His eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking. "Coffee?" I asked, my voice rasping. It sounded too loud in the hollow room. He didn't move. I stepped closer. My boots clicked against tile. That's when I saw it. His chest wasn't moving. No breath. His hands were stiff, fingers curled unnaturally. His skin wasn't skin at all, it was plastic. He was a mannequin. My heart kicked against my ribs. I stumbled back, breath caught in my throat. Then his head tilted. Not much, just a few degrees. Enough to tell me he wasn't as lifeless as I thought. His lips parted with a faint creak, like hinges that hadn't been oiled in decades. "You're almost there," he rasped. The words cracked through me like ice water. My skin prickled, my stomach knotted. I bolted for the door. The bell jangled overhead as I burst back into the fog. The lot was empty. The pickup truck was gone. I scrambled into my rig, hands shaking, key turning hard in the ignition. The engine roared, a comfort I clung to as I shoved the gear and rolled back onto the highway. The fog seemed even thicker now. My high beams glowed against nothing. The silence pressed harder. Another milepost loomed. 112. I gritted my teeth, muttering curses under my breath. My grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles burned. Another. 112. And another. 112. The road wasn't carrying me forward anymore. It was folding in on itself, trapping me in the same mile over and over. I snatched up the CB, static flooding the cab. Breaker 19. "This is Raymond hauling southbound on 77. Anyone got eyes on this fog?" Static hissed, then warped. A faint sound crept through, buried deep. Laughter. Children laughing. My hand froze on the mic. The laughter faded into whispers. Words layered over words. Dozens of voices tangled together. My ex-wife's voice, my daughter's, even my own. "You'll never leave." The CB slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor. Shapes moved in the fog along the shoulder. At first, they looked like people, walking the edge of the road. Then my headlights cut through, and I saw their faces. Blank. Smooth. Featureless. Like mannequins. Every head turned in unison as I passed. I pressed harder on the gas, breath tearing in and out. The rig groaned, gears whining, but the fog swallowed everything ahead. Minutes later, light glowed faintly through the haze. Red neon. My chest tightened. The same gas station. Same crooked canopy. Same 2 rusted pumps. Same bell above the door. Pit stop market. I drove past this time, refusing to stop, refusing to look. But when my headlights swept the sign, the letters blurred. They didn't say pit stop market anymore. They said mile marker 0. When the sign shifted in my headlights, when those red buzzing letters melted and rearranged themselves to spell mile marker 0, something inside me broke loose. My chest heaved. My hands trembled so bad on the wheel I thought I'd lose control. I kept driving, eyes locked ahead, refusing to look at the station as it disappeared in the mirror. The fog pressed thicker, heavy as wet wool, swallowing the taillights, swallowing even the sound of my own rig. The silence was unnatural, not quiet like night should be, but smothering, like someone had stuffed cotton in the world's mouth. Another green milepost appeared. 112. I screamed, slamming the heel of my hand against the steering wheel. The sound was swallowed instantly, gone before it could echo. My throat burned, but the fog gave nothing back. I pressed the accelerator until the engine whined, gauges creeping toward red. The cab rattled, the trailer pulled hard, but the fog didn't thin. That's when the CB crackled. I flinched, staring down at the mic. It had fallen on the floor earlier, but the speaker hissed to life anyway, static swelling, then parting. A voice seeped through. "Raymond." My blood froze. It was my daughter's voice. "Daddy," she whispered, trembling. "Where are you? I can't see you." Tears blurred my vision. My hand shot down, fumbling for the mic. "Baby, I'm here. I'm driving. The static swallowed me. Her voice twisted, warped into something lower, darker. You'll never get home. I dropped the mic like it burned me. My chest convulsed, breath tearing ragged. When I looked back up, I nearly swerved off the road. There was an accident up ahead. Brake lights flickered dim in the fog. A sedan sat sideways across the lanes, hood crumpled, smoke rising faintly. My heart lurched. I stomped the brakes, tires screeching, rig fishtailing as I fought to keep it straight. The trailer lurched, but I managed to grind to a halt. The sedan sat silent. Shaking, I unbuckled, yanked the door open, and climbed down. My boots splashed in cold puddles as I stumbled toward the wreck. The driver's side window was shattered. I leaned down and froze. The car was empty. The seats were coated in dust. The dashboard was cracked and faded, like it had been abandoned for decades, yet the brake lights still glowed red. I backed away slowly, my pulse slamming. My breath fogged the air in quick bursts. That's when I noticed the milepost just beyond the wreck. 112. I scrambled back into the cab, slamming the door, fumbling the gear shift, and flooring it. Tires screeched, smoke curling in the mirrors, but I didn't care. I roared past the wreck, refusing to look back. The fog thickened even more. My headlights barely reached past the hood. And then, faintly, I saw movement. Figures. Dozens of them lined the shoulders now, standing in the fog. Their shapes blurred, but their heads turned in perfect unison as my rig passed. Blank faces, smooth skin, no eyes, no mouths. My stomach twisted, sweat chilled my back. They weren't mannequins this time. They were drivers, truckers, families. All frozen, pale, eyeless, mouths erased. Their hands lifted slowly, pointing at me as one. The CB hissed again. A dozen voices spilled through. Join us. I slammed the radio off, but the voices didn't stop. They pressed against the glass, muffled but clear. The figures whispered without mouths, their words vibrating through the cab walls. You're almost there. I don't know how long I drove after that. My sense of time shredded. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. All I had was the fog, the mileposts, the endless 112. Then faintly, lights glowed ahead. Another gas station. My grip on the wheel turned my knuckles white. It was the same canopy, the same pumps, the same squat building. But this time the neon sign didn't flicker red. It burned white. Mile marker 0. My breath stopped. My rig slowed on its own, like something pulling me off the asphalt. The wheel turned without my hands. I fought it, muscles straining, but the rig slid into the gravel lot like it belonged there. The pumps gleamed pale. The store windows were dark, but I could see figures inside, lined along the walls, standing still. Not mannequins, not people. Something in between. Their faces were pale blanks, their hands twitching faintly, like they were waiting for me. The bell above the door jingled, though no one had touched it. I don't remember choosing to get out. One moment I was gripping the wheel, the next my boots were crunching gravel. The fog swirled, clinging to my legs damp against my skin. The figures inside the store were clearer now. Their faces were gone, skin stretched smooth, but I recognized their clothes. A man in a flannel shirt I'd seen once at a truck stop outside Columbus. A woman in a diner uniform. A child clutching a teddy bear. Their heads tilted together, jerking like strings pulled by the same hand. Then their hands rose, pointing at me. I stumbled back. My breath came shallow. That's when I saw the sign beside the door. Not neon this time. A simple green post, reflective numbers glowing. 0. The ground shook beneath my boots. The fog thickened until I couldn't see the hood of my own rig. The store dissolved into white. The pumps vanished. And when the fog parted, the highway stretched out again. But it wasn't the same. The pavement was cracked, broken, glowing faint beneath. Shapes moved in the mist ahead, rigs rolling silently. Headlights dim and steady. Their cabs were twisted, their trailers bent, but they moved smooth as if pulled by invisible chains. One of them was mine. I froze, heart slamming. Through the shattered glass of the cab, I saw myself. Not the living me, not the breathing me. A pale figure with blank skin where my face should be, hands stiff on the wheel, driving forever. The other me turned its head. Though it had no eyes, no mouth, I felt it smile. And I understood. Mile marker 0 wasn't a place you reached. It was the point where you stopped belonging to the living road and became part of the dead one. The fog folded over me, heavy and endless. The last thing I felt was the wheel locking under my hands.